Hello and welcome. Chris from Missouri here, bringing you another video about vintage baseball cards. In this video, I'm going to show you a couple cards at the very end, but it's not the cards on this one that is really important. Matter of fact, I'm probably showing you probably the worst set of cards that I've ever showed on YouTube before, and it's not a set of cards. It's the worst group of cards probably. But I just I want to show them just because that's what I say I do on my channel. But this one, I'm going to tell you a little bit of story and talk about YouTube in general and talk about baseball card collecting in general. And I hope it goes over real well. And I'm not grinding an axe or I'm not going on a rant or anything like that. But this YouTube has been pretty cool for me. And before I get started, the sponsors of this YouTube channel right here, right now, are three non YouTubers. They are commenters. And that is Ruben Snyder, one of the all time great commenters on our local little YouTube stuff. My friend Carl from Australia is sponsoring this. He just doesn't even know it yet. And my friend Tom is sponsoring this, and I talk about Tom all the time. None of those guys are YouTube content creators, but they are sponsors of this show. So give them a like in the comments if you would, because I bet they read this eventually, because they comment on a lot of stuff. And if you know them, you know how good of commenters they are. But this past week and weekend, I've had just tons of fun in collecting. I went to I went to a card show past Saturday and met up with a lot of YouTubers, and I did a video about it. But the night before that, I had two grown men come up and spend the night at my house, and all we did was collect or trade cards and talk about baseball and talk about just life in general. The three of us stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning. What I forgot on that Saturday when I woke up and went to the card show is at 2 o'clock in the morning we were talking about the possibility of taking a trip to Probstein Auctions, or Probstein. I think it's Probstein is what I'm going to call it, and I don't want to offend anybody. But if this was going to be a title of this show, it's going to be called Eastbound and Down. And if you don't know what that, if you haven't heard the term or the show Smokey and the Bandit, you're probably not going to enjoy this next little 10 minutes of talk. But anyway, basically what we did at 2 o'clock in the morning, we said, we need to get some cards to Probstein. And there's a couple reasons why we didn't want to, not we, but it didn't want to be mailed. See, the person that spent the night up here was my friend Tom, who's sponsoring this channel, and my friend Coop, who should be sponsoring this channel. And he didn't want to mail his cards to Probstein. He was wanting to take some stuff up to the auction so he could sell. But last time he boxed some stuff to take up to send, it kind of got lost in the mail for over 25 days. And there was a lot of value in there. And if you ever had to claim something from the Postal Service or FedEx or even UPS, it can be a hassle. And just if you're like me and you have cards in the mail, you can't wait till they get there. Well, my friend Coop kind of did the math, and he said, I'm going to take off and I'm going to drive straight through and I'm going to go drop some unopened boxes, okay? Some unopened boxes so it can be sold, and I'm going to drive back. And, Tom and we weren't even drinking. We thought, you shouldn't be doing that alone. We could help you. Well, that sounded great at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday night before a card show that Saturday. And, sound great. But then when it got to the card show, man, I was staggering, at the end, and I was tired. We had some YouTube creators come up here to the house, and golly, it even wore me out even more. And my wife comes home Sunday after a long trip, and I tell her, hey, I think I'm going with Coop and Tom. We're going to take some cards all the way to New Jersey. And instead of her saying, golly, can't you stay home for a little bit? Because she had been gone on a little getaway vacation with her cousin and my daughter. And she could have very well said this, but her terms were, okay, how long are you going to be gone? And is there, you got everything all ready? And the answer to those questions were, I don't know how long we're going to be gone, and no, I don't have everything ready. But I'm glad I married the right person, because she's the most spontaneous person that I know, really. And I can think back of when we first got married. We were celebrating a anniversary, like a 5th year anniversary probably, and we got a call from a former student and a basketball player for me that turned 21, and she asked us to come down to celebrate with her. And my wife and I, at a young age, we could have came up with 100 reasons to say no. But we got the phone call of a person that asked, and that was such a pretty cool thing that we decided to go celebrate a 21st birthday party with a young friend who is now a friend of ours. And my wife's always been like that. Somebody asks her to do something, and it's an adventure to her. And I'm glad we've been married this long that we now have adventures. But let's get on back to Tom and Coop. We decided we were going to take off at 7 in the morning. We were going to drive. Now, we looked up on the map, and there's supposed to be about 32 hours of driving, but that's a long time for my fat rear end to sit in a car and my butt gets sore. But we started taking off, and Coop had everything loaded up in his SUV. I parked my vehicle at Billy Ballgame's house. That tends to be halfway between Columbia and where Coop is, and that was easy for me to park my vehicle there on such a short notice. Got in with Coop, and we took off. We picked up Tom about another 40 miles down the road, and now we're heading off to New Jersey. We didn't have any hotel rooms planned. We didn't even know if we're going to need it. Matter of fact, I came up with an idea on the way. Let's call up Don Field of Dreams. He's on I-70, which we were on, heading to New Jersey. And without skipping a beat, Don is just like us. Well, I'll tell my wife you guys are coming, but just, you can just stay here at the house. Beds are going to be full, but you can sleep in the living room. Got a couple couches for you. He didn't care at all. It was easy for him. So he's like one of us. And we were driving and trying to do the math. And if we stopped at Don's house and didn't get a little bit closer, it would have been hard for us to drop these cards off and then turn around and head back home. And it wouldn't have worked out time-wise. So throughout the day, I was trying to think of a better plan than that. And, it was kind of funny because I was trying to work by the phone, and every time somebody called, it was like, what the heck are you doing driving to New Jersey? And then I'd have to explain to somebody. And every time somebody called, I think Mike Baseball Collector called, called, and I told him that we were like Smokey and the Bandit. We had $100,000 worth of unopened boxes in Coop's vehicle, and I felt like we just needed a Trans Am out in front of us to get us there, and we kind of had a joke, but it just kind of get some people, my friends at work and stuff, just like, what are you doing? And then Tom, same way, he'd get a message and they couldn't understand why in the heck we would drop what we were doing and going to New Jersey. And we don't blame them. We kind of felt silly ourselves. But it just kept, we wanted to do it, not just for Coop to get his cards there, but it's an adventure. And we spent we drove about 13 or 14 hours, stopped. We didn't really stop to eat. We had a really great diet of cashew nuts, beef jerky, and Diet Dr. Pepper. And unless Kathy Cooper's watching this, and we had celery, carrots, and Brent had some kiwi ground drink, but we spent the whole time, seriously, the whole time talking about baseball cards, our collection, which direction is our collection going, and all three of us have unique, different collections. But we have one tie together, and that is we collect baseball cards, and we are, you know, let's face it, if you're a hard baseball collector as we are, it's hard to explain to some of our friends, but I know who it's not hard to explain to. Most of you that are watching this, because if you're a baseball card collector, you know. Well, anyway, we called Don because we drove past his house and waved to him on the way and didn't stop, and we went on down the road for a couple hours. We were all tired. We got in a hotel, tried to put a third blow up bed in there, which we did, and it was like a comedy routine trying to figure everything out. We got up early the next day, had this fine breakfast of I had Apple Jacks, and because I did not want to partake of almost eggs and turkey sausage. Not that I'm putting that down, it just didn't look good to me. Tom and Brent had something similar, and we headed out on our way. And just some unique stuff all the way, but still just talking about baseball cards, never ending. Never ending, talking about baseball players and different types, just different things. And we made it to Probstein. Now, this is a story about taking cards to Probstein. And they moved locations. And when we walked up there, I don't know what I was expecting, but all three of us thought it was different than what we were expecting. And all three of us thought it was different. We had different expectations. But they talked to us, and I think they were pretty impressed about the unopened boxes that Coop had to give them. He took pictures of it. They gave us an inventory, and away we went. We weren't there 20 minutes, and we started coming home. Now, our thoughts were we're going to stop at a card shop on the way home and get home, by whatever Wednesday sometime. But Coops was a coach of a softball team, even though he's retired, high school softball team, and they won the state title in Missouri, and their awards banquet was at 6 p.m. on Wednesday. And we had to get him back to there, and we are now over 16, 17 hours away. And so I'm kind of doing the math, and card shops are going to be closed usually around by 5, and it just wasn't going to happen. And we drove for 5 hours, and not quite 5 hours, and we just passed the hotel that we stayed in the night before, and we were like, oh my gosh, is this how far we got? Because we got a long ways to go, because we knew how long it took us to get there. So we kept going, and we're trying to do the math, and there's just no way that a card shop was going to be open. So we decided to drive on through and to make it home. And all three of us took turns driving. Brent drove hard that first part of the morning at going to Probstein, and he drove a couple hours after. And then Tom drove, and then I drove. And then we decided, as we were doing the math, we just said it's just not working out. Let's just keep driving home, keep each other awake. And the way we kept each other awake was, again, talking about baseball cards. And, we're as wide awake. We're like young kids, wide awake, because we didn't want to miss out on what any one of us was saying to the other when they were talking about baseball cards. And at 4:45 on Wednesday morning, I pulled into my driveway after I picked up my car from Billy, of course. Well, let me go back. We dropped off Tom, who his wife was gracious enough to meet us at 2 o'clock in the morning. Brent dropped me off, and he was still wide awake. He had about 30 minutes to go, and he dropped me off, and I had 30 minutes to go the other direction. I pull in my driveway at 4:45. My wife is outside walking the dog because she's getting ready to work out that morning. I give her a kiss on the cheek. I go in and lay down on the bed. I wake up 3 hours later, and I go on to work, and I'm just tired of work. But I looked back on it and think, golly, I could have come out up with 100 reasons not to go on that trip. Just like my wife and I could have came up with 100 reasons not to go out to celebrate somebody else's birthday on our anniversary. But I'm so glad we did. I didn't pick up a single card at a shop. And I got this. Coop gave me this before we got in the car. And this is a John Donaldson card because he knows I'm a John Donaldson collector. And he picked that up from me. And then he gave us all a Joe Crede autographed card with a story behind it about his daughter being on a track team with his Joe Crede's daughter. But, all that doesn't matter. Those cards, I'm glad I have them because they're going to be able to tell that story later on. But, man, we wouldn't have done this if it wasn't for YouTube. And I promise you that. I mean, Coop and I have been friends for a long time, but not this kind of friends. We coached together for 5 years, but we didn't, work was more of our conversation, not baseball cards. But if it hadn't been for YouTube, Tom wouldn't have reached out to me. And I'm not telling, if you're watching this, I'm not telling you to go do YouTube content. I'm not. But don't be afraid to, if you don't have anybody that calls you up on a Sunday and says, hey, you want to take off and drive 16 hours because of baseball cards, then reach out. Reach out to somebody on YouTube. Reach out, become a commenter if there's some stuff that you like, But if you want to do a channel, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid because I'm not saying everything's going to work out for everyone because I've seen some negative stuff on YouTube that it doesn't work out for people one reason or another. But that's not me, And not tired of, that's wrong, but don't feel obligated that you have to explain why you collect like you collect. Explain it if somebody asks, but to me, if I have to explain to you why I collect the way I do over again, that means I'm apologizing for it, I feel like. So I'm going to tell you how I collect. And, if you ask me questions like why I do it that way, I'm going to give you that. And if you don't understand it, that's okay. But don't you be ashamed of how you collect. And, don't be ashamed how you describe cards. And don't be ashamed of what you collect. If you collect, I don't, you make up something. If you collect totally different than me, I don't care. I'm glad for you because you are part of this hobby, and you're part of this community. And maybe someday you'll get a call. You'll be sitting around, and somebody as crazy as Cooper says, "Hey, I'm driving. I'm going to drive 32 hours in 2 days, and I'm going to drive that far. You want to go with me?" And you might be dumb enough to just say yes. So, again, thanks for listening. Sorry about the 2 cards that I showed, but if I say sorry about that, I'm explaining to you about my cards. So I'm not sorry about that. That's the 2 cards I'm showing. The 3 sponsors of this are Carl. And the reason I made Carl first, Tom's a sponsor. And the reason I made Tom a sponsor is YouTube helped make us friends. Carl's a sponsor. Carl's from Australia, and he's crazy enough to travel all the way over to a card show in Strongsville, Ohio with his grandson just to meet some of us YouTubers. But what Carl did is he made some friends there, but he also gets to spend the rest of his life thinking about how great a time he had with his grandson. And I know his grandson will think for a long time how his grandpa took him all the way to Strongsville, Ohio to meet YouTubers that collect baseball cards. And finally, the reason that Ruben Snyder's on this thing is he comments on stuff, and he's the typical person. Now, Ruben Snyder's not typical on anything, but Ruben is a guy that doesn't want to do content, but he wants to enjoy the hobby. And he does so, and he does so a lot. And I'm just saying, you don't have to be a content creator to have fun and to do crazy things. So remember, everybody, this is a hobby. Collect what you like.